Once upon a time, there was a field. And of course, normally, fields are not very good places for stories to happen. They tend to be flat, empty, plain, fairly homogeneous, and rarely the site of exciting drama. And for years and years and years upon end, this field was just like that. No stories were being told about it because nothing special had happened there. No dramatic tensions. No brutal shootouts. No romantic trysts. But just as many rivers can run peacefully for years and then flood their banks unexpectedly, sometimes placid fields become the stuff of stories. And one day this field began to revolt. Small things at first. A small patch of grass would suddenly go flat, not a crop circle. Nothing quite so intricate, just a small spot that was gone. This, of course, could be easily written off as an animal or a small blight of bacteria, but of course it was never written off because no one noticed. It was just out there in the middle of a field somewhere. But over time, the changes began to grow and became more noteworthy, shall we say. There was the week that a full, perfect line from east to west of common grasses suddenly converted into full-grown sunflowers. There were no sunflowers in the region, no chance of cross-pollination, and even if there had been, certainly they would have grown over time, but they were simply there. And the next week, gone. One day there was a tree there, in the middle of the field. Again, no tree had been planted, and even if it had, certainly it couldn't grow just like that. At this point, people did begin to notice. There was a small highway that ran by the field. Not a tremendously well-traveled one, but there were cars, there were travelers and locals, and they did begin, just looking out the window on their daily drives, to realize, are those sunflowers? Jessica, have there always been sunflowers there? I don't think there have been. And at first it was just the subject of town gossip. But then, more and more things began to happen. A small tiny thunderstorm formed in the northwest quadrant of the field. So small and so low to the ground that it was almost cartoonish. Perhaps no bigger than the wingspan of a normal adult human, but with lightning so ferocious that it lit the grass aflame. For an entire month, the field sang. Beautiful voices, not quite human, but still familiar and recognizable. At this point, it was impossible to ignore what was happening in the field, and it was impossible to contain it to small-town gossip. People started telling their friends out of town, and then those friends, of course, followed suit. It wasn't long before people were posting about it on the internet. And all of a sudden, everyone had heard of the field. People had theories, of course, the full spectrum of crackpot ideas. Aliens, of course. an interdimensional rift, drunk college kids with too much time on their hand, and a lot of mirrors. Everyone had a theory, but no one knew. And sometimes these legends die there. They simply become the stuff of creepypastas and urban legend. But the field was getting stronger. The field was getting more dramatic. One day, and only for a minute, 60 seconds exactly, in fact, Brendan, who lived down the road, timed it. The entire field turned upside down. The roots of the grass sticking up in the air, the grass dangling down, and perhaps most upsettingly, the sky above the field, now below the grass. How the sky could possibly be that low to the ground, there was no way of knowing, but for 60 seconds exactly, that's where it was. This could never just be an urban legend. People had to investigate. Independent scientists, government teams, local universities, they all sent out their researchers, each with the same objective: discover the secret of the field, what was happening out there. They would measure every parameter, check every spectrum of light and sound, take soil samples, which, as you can imagine, was very difficult because the soil seemed to be moving constantly. They tried every technique in their scientific books, their government list of protocol. But it became more and more difficult. It was as if the field itself was trying to thwart their efforts. Pieces of equipment would disappear. At first, the teams thought that these were accidents, being in the wrong place at the wrong time, getting caught up in the wrong anomaly. But the disappearances of the equipment seemed to have a sense of humor. Cameras would go down mere seconds before a phenomenon got close enough for it to actually capture any useful footage. Microphones would go dead as soon as an anomaly started, and come back again as soon as it ceased. And if they played back the tape in between, they would hear whispered words that no one could decipher. These pieces of equipment weren't just going missing, they were being stolen. This was a field that had learned how to rob and pillage those who sought to know its true self. After weeks of this, the researchers became despondent. Many of them had already left, fearing for their safety. For while some of the anomalies remained small and benign, like the one time that there was a cow out in the middle of it that when you approached simply disappeared, although you could still hear it no matter where you were. Other anomalies had become more violent. The worst was when the field seemed to do nothing at all. It looked the same, sounded the same, but it just wasn't there for a few minutes. For all intents and purposes, it became a hole in the earth, and any person in the field at the time was simply gone. Finally, everyone had left, except for one young man, a student, not there with any team, not there on assignment, but there because he could not stop his curiosity. He knew the danger, but one evening, after everyone else had gone, he walked out into the field. No equipment, no gear, no microscopes, no telescopes, no spectrographs, electrographs, micrographs. He went to the center of the field and he sat down and simply was. As he sat, he asked no questions, proposed no hypotheses. He did not ruminate or ideate. He simply sat in the field. He sat there all night, looking up at the stars. And in the morning, as the wind gently blew through the grasses, the young man heard the field as if it was whispering to him. And the field whispered, "Thank you. I just wanted someone to notice me, not to prod or poke, to dissect or to understand. I just wanted someone to be with me." "70 years later, there had been no more anomalies, no more irregularities, no more oddness, large or small. And the field was empty and unremarkable once again, unremarkable except for one new landmark. A small plot of earth in the center of the field, with a small gravestone. A simple tomb for the only man to ever become best friends with a field. The end.